Rain hammered the Colorado prairie like it meant to bury the whole world. 4 miles outside Ash Ridge, the Purgatoire River had swollen past its banks, brown and roaring. It dragged branches, fence rails, and one riderless horse through the dark. Lightning split the sky. For one sharp second, a man appeared on the muddy road, crawling toward the only lantern still burning for miles. Inside the cabin, Eliza Harbrough sat alone by the hearth, mending a saddle with steady hands. She was not afraid of storms anymore. Storms were only noise. And after 11 years of widowhood, noise was easier than silence.
Eliza Harbrough had stopped expecting anything from nights like this. Not mercy, not company, not a reason to open her heart again. Truth was, one was already crawling toward her door. I'm Abel Beecham, though most folks in Ash Ridge call me Mr. B. Out here, a person could disappear beneath the sky and leave no mark but dust. But sometimes, one quiet act of mercy could push back against the whole wide emptiness. That was the kind of night this became.
Then she heard something that was not thunder. A horse screamed. Eliza froze. The scream cut off all at once. She set the saddle aside, rose from her chair, and crossed to the door. Rain beat hard against the boards. Wind shoved at the shutters. Then something heavy struck the threshold. Eliza pulled the door open. A man lay collapsed half across it, soaked in river mud, bleeding from the head. One hand still clenched around a torn rein. He lifted his eyes, but there was barely any life left in them. Eliza looked past him into the blackness. The river roared somewhere beyond the yard. No horse, no wagon, no companion, no lantern coming after him. Only rain, mud, and death pressing close to her door. She bent down, hooked both hands under his arms, and braced her boots against the wet floorboards. "Lord have mercy," she said. "You picked the wrong night to die." Then Eliza Harbrough dragged the stranger inside. The stranger was heavier than he looked. Eliza was only 5'4", and he was over 6 feet of soaked wool, mud, blood, and dead weight. She could not lift him. She had to drag him. It took her nearly 20 minutes to move him from the open doorway to the hearth. When the door was finally shut against the storm, Eliza dropped to her knees beside him and pressed 2 fingers to his throat, still breathing, barely. She did not waste breath cursing. She had healed ranchers kicked by mules, boys split open by axes, and mothers shaking after childbirth. Panic never stitched a wound. Fear never set a bone. She cut his shirt open with her sewing scissors. 3 cracked ribs, a shoulder out of place. A scalp wound bleeding into his left eye. Bruised knuckles. Old scars across his back that had not come from any river. She heated water, tore clean cloth, packed herbs against the swelling, and braced his arm against her knee. When she pulled his shoulder back into place, he screamed awake. His eyes locked on hers, wild with pain. "Am I dead?" "Not yet," Eliza said. "Lie still." Then his eyes rolled shut, and he was gone again. By firelight, she stitched his scalp with the same steady hands that had buried a husband, held a dying child, and kept a lonely spread alive through 11 winters. Only after the bleeding slowed did she search his coat for anything that might name him. In the inside pocket, she found a folded, water-stained scrap of paper. One name was written in pencil, Mary Gallagher. Below it, in a child's careful hand, was one crooked word, home. Eliza stared at it for a long moment. Then she laid the scrap flat on the hearthstone to dry, close enough to the fire for warmth, but far enough not to burn. She did not know who Mary Gallagher was. She did not know why the word home looked like it had been written by a child trying to believe in it. All she knew was that the stranger on her floor had carried both through the flood. And for tonight, at least, Eliza Harbrough would not let the river take anything else. Dawn came pale and quiet over the wet prairie. Steam lifted from the grass. The storm had passed east, leaving broken branches, deep wagon ruts, and the Purgatoire still growling beyond the Cottonwoods. Inside the cabin, Finn Gallagher woke in a bed that was not his. For a moment, he did not know where he was. He smelled coffee, wet wool, wood smoke, and the sharp, clean bite of arnica. Then he saw the whitewashed walls, the drying bandages near the hearth, and his torn coat hanging over a chair. Memory came back in pieces. The river, the horse screaming, a woman's voice telling Death it had picked the wrong night. Then pain found him. Finn tried to sit up, but his ribs seized and his bandaged shoulder pulled fire through his arm. Don't. The voice came from the stove. Eliza Harbrough stood with her back to him, pouring coffee as if half-dead men appeared in her house every morning. You got 3 cracked ribs, she said. A shoulder that tried to leave your body, and a head wound that should have killed you. You stay flat today. If fever doesn't take you, we'll talk about sitting up tomorrow. Finn swallowed hard. My horse? Eliza's hand stilled on the coffee pot, just for a breath. Then she turned and gave him the truth. The river took him. Finn closed his eyes. Not from pain this time. From grief. Eliza saw it, and something in her softened before she could stop it. Whatever else this man was, he had loved that horse. After a while, Finn asked, Anyone come looking? No. A strange calm passed over his face, almost like relief. Then he turned his head toward the wall and whispered. Then no one lost much. Eliza did not answer. But those words stayed in the room long after the coffee cooled. By noon, Eliza rode into Ash Ridge with her bonnet low and her basket nearly empty. She needed coffee, sugar, bandage cloth, and laudanum. She needed them quickly, and she needed them without the whole town asking why a half-drowned man was lying in her cabin. But Ash Ridge had never let Mercy stay private for long. The general store went quiet the moment she stepped inside. Mrs. Martha Calloway stood behind the counter, her gray hair pinned tight, her mouth folded into judgment. I heard you've got a man out at your place, Eliza, she said. A young one. A flour scoop stopped midair. 2 ranch hands turned their heads. Eliza kept her basket steady. I have an injured man who nearly drowned in the Purgatoire. He'll move on when he can walk. Martha smiled without warmth. Folks are wondering why you did not bring him to town. A widow living alone with a strange man does invite questions. Eliza placed her coins on the counter. Reverend Henderson knows I set bones cleaner than Doc Merrill. So do you. Martha's eyes sharpened. Years earlier, Martha's sister had nearly died giving birth. Doc Merrill had given up, but Eliza had not. Eliza's hands saved both mother and child that night. Most people would have called that mercy. Martha Calloway called it humiliation. From that day on, she had hated Eliza for being right. When Eliza asked for bandage cloth on her usual account, Martha pulled the store ledger closer and shut it. Credit is for households in good standing. The words landed hard. Everyone heard them. Eliza looked at the closed ledger. Then she looked at Martha. For one breath, she wanted to explain herself. Then she remembered the man in her cabin, breathing because she had opened the door. She paid with nearly every coin she had and left with fewer supplies than she needed. On the ride home, halfway between Ash Ridge and her lonely spread, Eliza caught herself touching the gray hair beneath her bonnet. Then she pulled her hand away. She had saved a life. And somehow Ash Ridge had made it sound like sin. By the 3rd day, Finn Gallagher was tired of lying still. Eliza found him in the barn with one hand gripping a stall post. His bare feet braced in the straw, and his jaw set like pride alone could hold him upright. It could not. His knees buckled. Eliza crossed the stall fast and caught him before he hit the ground. For 3 seconds, his weight leaned against her. His breath was sharp with pain, and his face was close enough for her to see the gold flecks in his brown eyes. She hated herself for noticing that before she noticed his bandage had slipped. Then she helped him back onto the cot and stepped away before the closeness could show on her face. You're stubborn, she said. That may help keep you alive. Finn gave a weak smile. Hasn't done much for me yet. By the 5th day, he could sit up long enough to drink coffee from a tin cup. Eliza sat near the barn door, mending a bridle where the morning light caught the gray in her hair. Finn watched her hands move through the leather. Forgive me asking, he said softly, but how did you come to run this whole spread alone? Eliza's hands paused. Then she told him about Thomas, her husband. A good man. A quiet man. Fever took him the same winter their baby girl, Abigail, followed him into the ground. She told it flat, like reading from a ledger. But Finn did not look away. That night, while Eliza crossed the yard with a lantern, she heard Finn humming softly from the barn. It was the same hymn they had sung at Thomas's grave. Eliza stopped in the dark. He had remembered it. He had paid attention to her sorrow. On the 6th evening, she found him standing at the open barn door, one hand braced against the frame, staring toward the cottonwoods where the river bent. "You planning to limp all the way back into it?" His answer came low. "Wouldn't have far to go." Eliza looked at him closely, sensing there was more pain behind those words. But Finn turned his face away before she could ask the question he was not ready to answer. On the 7th day, she sat on an overturned feed bucket beside his cot and mended his torn shirt. Finn watched her hands. "You've got surgeon's hands," he said. Eliza laughed. A real laugh. It surprised her so much she covered her mouth. Finn did not laugh at her. He only looked moved. "I didn't mean to startle you." Her smile faded, but not fully. "No one has said anything kind about my hands in a long while." Finn's voice softened. "Then no one's been looking proper." Eliza looked down at the shirt in her lap, but her fingers had gone still. For the first time in years, she did not feel like only a widow, a healer, or a pair of useful hands. She felt seen. And that frightened her more than the storm had. For 3 days, Finn kept a small piece of cedar hidden beneath his blanket. Eliza heard the quiet scrape of his knife each evening after chores, but when she asked what he was making, he only looked down with a tired half-smile. Nothing worth fussing over. By the 10th morning, he could stand for a short spell if he leaned on his crutch. When Eliza came into the barn, he was waiting beside the cot with one hand on the crutch and the other closed around something small. His face was pale from the effort, but his eyes were steady. "I made this for you," he said. Eliza looked at his palm. It was a wooden hair comb, carved from cedar and smoothed with beeswax. Simple. Plain. Beautiful. "For your surgeon's hands," Finn said. "They deserve something that isn't work." Eliza took it carefully. No man had given her a gift since Thomas died. For a moment the barn went quiet around them, the hay, the leather, the ache in Finn's ribs. The 11 lonely years behind her. All of it fell away. Finn was not a patient then. He was a grown man standing before a woman, offering beauty without asking for anything back. That afternoon, Eliza wore the comb into Ash Ridge. She still needed more bandage cloth, and after Martha's insult over the store ledger, part of her wanted to keep her head down. But she would not let shame choose her reflection. She pinned the cedar comb into her gray streaked hair before she left. It sat there plain as sunrise and brave as a flag. The moment Eliza stepped into the general store, Martha Calloway saw it. Her eyes narrowed. "Well," Martha said loudly, "that is a pretty thing for a grieving widow." Eliza's hand rose halfway to the comb. Then she stopped herself. Every person in the store was watching. Outside, down the dusty street, Finn Gallagher had just climbed carefully from one of Eliza's gentler mares. He had followed slowly after finding the supply list still on the kitchen table and realizing she had gone back to face Martha alone. Each step toward the store door pulled at his ribs, but Finn kept coming. He pushed the store door open. The little bell above it rang sharp. Eliza turned, startled. "Finn, what are you doing?" He did not answer her first. He limped to the counter, leaned hard on his crutch, and laid a few coins beside Eliza's basket. "Mrs. Harbrough saved my life," he said, his voice low but clear. "If this town has mistaken mercy for scandal, that is the town's shame, not hers." No one moved. Martha Calloway's mouth tightened. "You would defend her, of course," she said. "Men often defend what they have taken." Finn's jaw flexed. Pain flashed across his face, but anger did not rule him. He stood taller instead. "I have taken nothing from her," he said. "I owe her everything." The word struck the room harder than shouting would have. Eliza looked at him then. Not as the broken man she had dragged from the storm. Not as a patient who needed broth, bandages, and watching. but as a grown man willing to spend his strength so she would not spend her dignity alone. Martha's hand went to the closed ledger, but every eye in the store was on her now. Slowly, she opened it. She slid the bandage cloth across the counter like it burned her fingers. Finn picked up the package and offered it to Eliza. Their fingers brushed. For one quiet second, the whole store seemed to disappear. Then whispers began again. But this time, Eliza did not lower her head. Finn paid for the cloth, then turned carefully toward the door. Eliza walked beside him, close enough to steady him if his ribs betrayed him, but proud enough not to hide behind him. Outside, he paused by the hitching rail and caught his breath. Ash Ridge watched them leave together, and for the first time, Eliza let them watch. At sunset, Eliza found Finn beneath the cottonwoods where the river bent. The trip to town had cost him. His ribs had ached worse all afternoon, but still he had taken his crutch and made his slow way from the barn to the grove. A crooked line of crutch marks trailed behind him in the damp earth. The Purgatoire moved brown and restless beyond the trees, the same river that had taken his horse and nearly taken him too. "You ought not be this far from the barn," Eliza said. Finn stood with one hand braced against a cottonwood trunk. "I'll be strong enough to leave soon." The words landed harder than she expected. Eliza folded her arms, hiding her hands. "I know." Then Finn looked back at her, and there was no drifting left in his eyes. "I don't want to." The cottonwood leaves trembled overhead. Eliza's heart moved toward him before her pride could stop it. So she stopped it herself. "Finn, I am 47 years old. You are not even 30. I have buried a husband and a child. My hands are rough, my hair is gray. I stopped being the kind of woman men look at a long time ago." He turned fully toward her, careful and slow. Every breath still hurt him, but he did not look away. "I have been looked at my whole life," he said, "by bosses who wanted a strong back, by strangers who wanted a card partner, by women who saw a face and a hat and nothing beneath it." He took one step closer, then stopped before pain could make him stumble. "But no one ever looked at me like you did when you stitched my head. Like I was worth saving, even if I was not worth keeping." Eliza's eyes burned. "I'm too old for you." "No," Finn said softly. She shook her head, fighting the hope rising in her chest. "Then find someone younger. Someone the town won't laugh at. Someone who can give you years I don't have." Finn looked at her with pain in his face, but no doubt in his eyes. "I already found the one I want." The word struck her harder than any kiss could have. For one trembling moment, Eliza almost reached for him. Then the church bell rang faintly from Ash Ridge. She remembered the store, Martha's voice, the watching faces, the way the whole town had looked at the cedar comb in her hair as if hope itself were something shameful. Her hand fell. Finn did not move closer. He did not press her. He only stood there, hurting and honest. "You were too honest for men who wanted an easy woman," he said. "Too strong for people who needed you quiet. But you are not too old for me." Eliza's voice broke low. "I can survive being lonely. I don't know if I can survive being laughed at for hoping." Finn's face changed, not with anger, with understanding. He let the silence stand between them, because he knew love could not be forced across a wound. Eliza turned back toward the cabin before her courage could fail completely. And beneath the cottonwoods, the two names they feared most still hung between them. Old widow. Unworthy man. By the third Sunday after the storm, Finn Gallagher could ride beside Eliza without a crutch. He was still pale. His ribs still punished him when he breathed too deep, but that morning, when Eliza Harbrough rode into Ash Ridge wearing the cedar comb, Finn kept his shoulders square beside her. The whispers began before the first hymn was finished. After service, the congregation spilled into the churchyard under a hard blue sky. Women gathered near the steps. Ranchers stood with hats in their hands. Children chased dust near the fence until their mothers pulled them close. Then Martha Calloway stepped forward with a charity basket in her hands and a smile sharp enough to cut cloth. "I brought this for you, Eliza," she said loudly, "since caring for a grown man has apparently burdened your household." Heat rose in Eliza's face. Martha tilted her head. It is hard, I suppose, for a lonely woman to remember appearances. The churchyard went still. Finn stepped forward, but Eliza raised one hand. Not behind me, her gesture said. Beside me. Finn stopped at her shoulder. Before Eliza could speak, old Mrs. Henderson crossed the yard. The preacher's wife was small, bent with age, and clear-eyed enough to know the difference between sin and loneliness. Martha Calloway, she said, you have mistaken cruelty for virtue again. A ripple moved through the crowd. Mrs. Henderson turned to the congregation. When my Henry and I married, I was 19 and he was 18. Children, really. Do you know what I have learned since then? Love is not measured by the number of years behind you. It is measured by who shows up when someone is bleeding on a doorstep, and who has the courage to open the door. Martha's smile vanished. And let us remember, Mrs. Henderson continued, who came running when Martha's own sister nearly died in childbirth. It was not gossip that saved her. It was not pride. It was Eliza Harbrough's hands. Faces shifted. A young mother stepped forward. She saved my boy from fever. An old rancher removed his hat. Set my wrist better than Doc Merrill. One by one, memory rose louder than rumor. Then Finn stood fully beside Eliza. I am not a stain on Mrs. Harbrough's name, he said. I am a man alive because of her. And as she lets me, I intend to spend whatever years I am given proving I know the worth of that. The churchyard held its breath. Eliza looked at the town, at Martha's tight mouth, at the faces that had used her hands when they needed healing, then mocked her heart when it dared to hope. Then she looked at Finn, and this time she did not let anyone else name what stood between them. Finn Gallagher owes me nothing, Eliza said, her voice steady enough for every soul to hear. He is not my burden. He is not my shame. And I am not asking this town's permission to be treated with tenderness. No one spoke. Martha looked down at the charity basket in her hands, and suddenly it looked less like kindness than insult. Eliza lifted her chin. For the first time in 11 years, shame lost its grip in daylight. At dusk, Eliza found Finn by the Purgatoire River. He stood where the bank curved beneath the cottonwoods, staring at the same dark water that had taken his horse and nearly taken him. His saddlebag sat on the ground beside him, packed and buckled. Eliza saw it and felt her heart pull tight. You're leaving tomorrow, she said. Finn did not look at her. I thought I was. The river moved dark and restless below the bank. Then Finn's voice dropped. I came here to die. Eliza went still. Finn closed his eyes and shook his head. No, that is not quite true. I did not ride into that storm planning to die, but I was careless enough not to care if I did. And when the river pulled me under, I stopped fighting for a while. Eliza stepped closer, careful on the damp ground. Why? Finn looked down at his hands. Because I spent my life believing I was my father's son. And my father was a cruel man. He beat my mother until there was more silence in her than song. I was a boy, Eliza. I was small, and I could not stop him. His fingers curled like he hated them. Then I grew into a man with his shoulders, his hands, his temper, and my blood. I hired my gun and my back to cattle outfits, trail bosses, and men who never asked too many questions, never stayed more than a season, never let anyone get close enough to see what I feared I was. Eliza listened without moving. Finn's voice roughened. I thought maybe the world had enough Gallagher men. Eliza reached for his hand. It was rough, scarred, and trembling. You are not your father's son, she said. I have watched you for 3 weeks. You hum when you work. You carved me a comb because you noticed I still cared how I looked, even when I pretended not to. Finn's eyes filled. You asked my daughter's name, Eliza whispered, and you have said Abigail every day since, like she still deserves room in this world. The river carried the last of the light. You stood beside me in that store. You stood beside me in that churchyard. And you never made me smaller so you could look strong. She held his hand tighter. You are gentle, Finn Gallagher. You are kind. You are not the cruelty you came from. For the first time, Finn looked like a man hearing the truth and almost believing it. Then he whispered, and you are not the old widow Harbrough. Eliza's breath caught. Finn turned his hand in hers, not gripping, only holding. "You are Eliza," he said. "The woman who dragged death across her floor and told it no. The woman who still hums when she thinks no one hears. The woman who wears cedar in her hair like she was born to be seen." For 11 years the town had named her widow. Finished. Past hoping. For 11 years she had believed those names just enough to keep her heart behind a locked door, but Finn stood before her with sorrow in his eyes and love in his hands. He was not asking her to be young, untouched, or easy. He was asking her to be herself. "The woman I love," he whispered. Eliza looked at the packed saddlebag beside the river. Then she looked back at Finn. "I buried love once," she said. "I will not bury it alive just because this town tells me to." She stepped forward first. She raised one rough, healing hand to his cheek. Then she kissed him. It was not desperate. It was not foolish. It was the quiet, steady kiss of two people who had stopped letting grief, shame, and other people's names stand between them. When they parted, Finn rested his forehead gently against hers. "I don't want to run anymore," he said. Eliza touched the cedar comb in her hair, then let her hand fall back to his chest. "Then don't." The river moved on behind them, but this time it took nothing from them. It only carried away the last of what they no longer had to be. Morning came soft over Eliza Harbrough's cabin. Coffee warmed on the stove. Sunlight touched the whitewashed pine walls, the dried herbs in the rafters, and the tin mirror beside the bed. For the first time in 11 years, the room did not feel empty. Eliza stood at the stove with the cedar comb tucked in her gray-streaked hair. Behind her, Finn's footsteps crossed the floor. His arms circled her waist, slow and gentle, as if he still could not quite believe he had been allowed to stay. His chin rested near her shoulder. "I'm not leaving," he said. Eliza smiled without turning. "I know." A small silence passed between them. Then she added, "I wasn't going to let you." Finn laughed softly, and the sound filled the cabin like something new being born. Later that morning, they rode into Ash Ridge together, not hiding, not explaining. Eliza carried a crate of healing salves for Mrs. Henderson's charity table. Finn walked beside her, his crutch gone, one hand steady beneath the crate whenever the road dipped rough. He did not carry it for her. He helped her carry what was already hers. The town saw them. Some whispered, some looked away, but others nodded. The young mother whose child Eliza had saved crossed the street and took Eliza's hands. "I'm glad you have someone walking with you now." Eliza's eyes shone, but her head stayed high. Finn quietly stepped back, letting the young mother's gratitude belong fully to Eliza. Across the street, Martha Calloway watched from the store window, silent and sour. But silence was all she had left. Eliza and Finn walked back toward the wagon hand in hand. Behind them, Ash Ridge carried on with its bells, dust, and talk. But it no longer owned her. Ahead, the Cottonwoods stood gold in the morning light. And when winter came, the church bell rang again. Not for judgment this time. For vows. Eliza walked down the aisle with cedar in her hair, not as the old widow Harbrough, but as a woman fully seen. Finn waited for her with steady hands and clear eyes. And at last, Eliza Harbrough knew the truth. You are not what the world named you. You are what love has the courage to see.
Thank you for watching this story all the way to the end. If you enjoyed it, please like and share, it really helps us. And subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Before you go, rate this story 0 to 10 in the comments and tell me where you're watching from. I'll see you in the next tale.